Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Wade Burns had built his life on two unshakable pillars: loyalty to his country and loyalty to his family. At 42, the decorated Special Forces veteran commanded respect wherever he walked. His scarred hands told stories of classified missions across 3 continents, while his steel-gray eyes held secrets that would never see daylight. Stationed at Forward Operating Base Meridian in the contested territories, Wade served under his father-in-law, Colonel Harvey Cook, a political climber who'd married his way into military aristocracy and clawed his way to command through connections rather than combat. Wade had married Harvey's daughter Kendra 20 years ago, back when he was a young sergeant with more courage than sense. "Daddy always said you were too intense," Kendra had whispered during their last video call, her blonde hair perfectly styled even in the base housing. "Maybe when you get back, we can work on us." Wade had noticed the hesitation in her voice, the way she avoided looking directly into the camera. 20 years of marriage had taught him to read between the lines. Something was different. Someone was different. The truth came in the form of a reconnaissance photo his tech specialist, Martin Houston, had accidentally intercepted from a routine security sweep. The image showed Kendra wrapped in the arms of Major Eric Leonard, Harvey's golden boy protege and Wade's supposed best friend. They were in their family kitchen, the same kitchen where Wade had taught his son Preston to change a tire, where they'd celebrated Preston's acceptance to West Point. Wade's first instinct was the sniper's calm: assess, plan, execute. But this wasn't enemy territory. This was home. And home had just become the most dangerous battlefield he'd ever faced. Preston, now 20 and stationed at a communications outpost 50 miles north, had been sending worried messages about changes he'd noticed during his last leave. "Mom's different, Dad. She's distant. And why is Major Leonard always around when you're deployed?" Wade stared at the photo for 3 hours, memorizing every detail. Kendra's hand on Eric's chest, Eric's lips against her neck. The wedding ring, Wade's grandmother's ring, still on her finger like a mockery. His phone buzzed. Harvey's voice crackled through the secure line. "Wade, we need to talk. My office. Now." The walk across the compound felt like a death march. Wade had survived IEDs, sniper fire, and torture at the hands of enemy combatants. But nothing had prepared him for the look in his father-in-law's eyes. Cold calculation mixed with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "I know about the photo," Harvey said without preamble, settling behind his desk like a judge passing sentence. "Martin brought it to me first. Professional courtesy." Wade's jaw tightened. Even his own team was compromised. "Here's how this works," Harvey continued, pulling out a manila folder. "You're being reassigned. Effective immediately. There's a convoy mission tomorrow. High risk, low probability of return. Consider it a chance to die with honor rather than live with shame." "You're ordering me to die for your daughter's mistakes?" Harvey's smile was shark-like. "I'm giving you an opportunity to disappear quietly. Kendra's happiness is worth more than your wounded pride. Eric's a good man. Better for her than you ever were." Wade felt something cold and final settle in his chest. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a death sentence wrapped in false nobility. Harvey wasn't just protecting his daughter's affair. He was orchestrating Wade's elimination. "And if I refuse? Then that photo becomes public. Your security clearance gets revoked. Your pension disappears. Your son's career at West Point ends before it begins." Harvey leaned forward. "I own this base, Wade. I own your future. The only choice you have is how you want this story to end." Wade stood slowly, his movements controlled despite the rage building in his core. "I'll take the convoy mission." "Smart man." "Dismissed." As Wade walked toward the door, Harvey's voice stopped him. "For what it's worth, you were a good soldier. It's just time for good soldiers to step aside for better men." Wade paused at the threshold, his hand on the door frame. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet menace of a man who'd killed enemies with his bare hands. "Colonel, you've just made the biggest mistake of your life." The door closed behind him with the finality of a coffin lid. Chapter 2. Into the Fire. The convoy briefing felt like a wake. 6 vehicles, 12 men, a route through the most dangerous territory in the sector. Wade studied the mission parameters with professional detachment while rage simmered beneath his tactical calm. Sergeant Ted Brewer, his second in command for the past 3 years, approached with obvious reluctance. "Sir, this mission, it's a meat grinder. Why are we taking the northern route when Southern Passage is confirmed clear. Wade's eyes met Ted's. In that look, Ted saw everything he needed to know. This wasn't a mission, it was an execution. Orders are orders, Sergeant. Brief the men. As his team prepared, Wade made his own preparations. He sent encrypted messages to contacts outside the military, men who owed him favors from darker operations that officially never happened. Insurance policies, he called them. If Harvey wanted to play the game at this level, Wade would remind him who had actually walked through hell and back. Preston's worried voice crackled through the radio during the final equipment check. Dad, I'm picking up unusual chatter about your route. Command is routing all air support away from your Sector 4 training exercises. This doesn't feel right. I know, son. Listen carefully. If something happens to me, there's a safety deposit box at First National. Ask for Margaret Vaughn. She'll know who you are. Inside, you'll find everything you need to understand what really happened here. Dad, what are you talking about? Just promise me, Preston. And remember, in this family, we never forgive betrayal. Not from anyone. The convoy rolled out at 0400, 6 vehicles carrying 12 doomed men into the gray dawn. Wade rode in the lead Humvee, watching the landscape with the eyes of a man who knew he was driving into his own funeral. The attack came exactly where Wade expected it, the narrow pass where the road curved between 2 ridgelines. The first RPG hit the rear vehicle, turning it into a fireball. The second took out their communications array. Classic ambush, professionally executed. But Wade had prepared for this moment. As his men scrambled for defensive positions, he activated a secondary comm system, military-grade equipment that officially didn't exist. His voice cut through the chaos with cold precision. Brewer, take half the team and establish overwatch on the eastern ridge. Martinez, suppressive fire on the northern position. I'm moving to establish contact with base command. The radio crackled with Harvey's voice, and Wade knew every man in the convoy could hear it clearly through the open channel he'd prepared. Phoenix Actual, be advised all support units are engaged in training exercises. You are to hold position and await relief. Wade's response carried across the frequency with devastating clarity. Colonel Cook, this is your son-in-law calling. The same son-in-law you sent to die for sleeping with your daughter. The same son-in-law who knows about the weapons shipments you've been skimming for private sale. Every man in this convoy is recording this conversation. Harvey, want to tell them why their rescue has been canceled? The silence that followed was broken only by gunfire and the sound of Wade's calculated destruction of his father-in-law's career. All units, this is Phoenix Actual. I'm uploading classified files to an unsecured server. Colonel Cook's financial records, his arms dealing connections, and video evidence of Major Eric Leonard's relationship with my wife. Consider it my resignation letter. Ted Brewer's voice cut in, filled with cold understanding. Sir, we copy all transmissions. Orders. Wade's laugh was the sound of a man with nothing left to lose. Take the base, Sergeant. I believe we've just uncovered a conspiracy that requires immediate investigation. The convoy's defensive position became an offensive staging ground as Wade's men, veterans who'd followed him through impossible missions, understood that their commander had just declared war on their own command structure. Harvey's voice exploded across the radio. All units, Phoenix Actual has gone rogue. I repeat, Wade Burns is in violation of direct orders and is to be considered hostile. Wade's response was surgical in its precision. Negative, Command. Phoenix Actual has just exposed a conspiracy involving theft of military assets and adultery within the command structure. We are implementing emergency protocols for command compromise. All units are advised that Colonel Harvey Cook is relieved of command pending investigation. In the background, the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. But these weren't Harvey's birds. These were Wade's insurance policies coming to collect. The convoy that was supposed to be Wade's grave had just become Harvey's worst nightmare. Chapter 3, The Son's Choice. Preston Burns stared at the communications array in horror as his father's voice echoed through the command bunker. Around him, technicians and junior officers watched in stunned silence as their respected Colonel Cook was systematically destroyed by one of their own. Sir, whispered Corporal Jake Fritz, the young communications specialist. Should we cut the transmission? Preston's hand hovered over the controls. One switch could end his father's broadcast, potentially saving Harvey's career and his mother's reputation. but it would also mean condemning his father to death in that ambush. The choice crystallized in Preston's mind as Harvey's panicked voice filled the bunker. Someone cut that transmission. Burns has classified intel that could compromise national security. Preston looked around the bunker at men he'd known since childhood, soldiers who'd served under his father with absolute loyalty. These weren't just military personnel. They were family friends, honorary uncles, men who'd taught him to shoot, to fight, to be a soldier. Corporal Fritz, Preston said with deadly calm, amplify the signal. I want every base in the sector to hear this. Fritz hesitated. Sir, your grandfather. My grandfather is a traitor, Preston cut him off. And apparently, so is my mother. The bunker erupted in chaos as Harvey burst through the door, his face purple with rage. Preston, shut down that transmission immediately. That's a direct order. Preston turned to face the man he'd called grandfather for 20 years. On whose authority? You're currently under investigation for conspiracy, theft of military assets, and conduct unbecoming an officer. I'm still your commanding officer. No, Preston replied, his voice carrying the same steel as his father's. You're a criminal who sent my father to die to cover up your daughter's adultery. Harvey's hand moved toward his sidearm, a gesture that wasn't lost on the dozen soldiers in the bunker. The tension was thick enough to cut as Preston stepped closer to his grandfather, his own hand resting on his weapon. Go ahead, Preston whispered. Draw on me in front of all these witnesses. Complete your transformation from respected colonel to court-martial defendant. The standoff was broken by Sergeant Major Clayton Fox, a 30-year veteran who'd served with Wade in 3 different conflicts. Colonel Cook, sir, I'm placing you under arrest pending investigation of the charges broadcast by Phoenix Actual. Harvey's world collapsed as Fox and 2 other sergeants moved to restrain him. You can't do this. I'm your commanding officer. Not anymore, Fox replied grimly. Preston, patch me through to your father. Preston's fingers flew over the controls. Dad, this is Little Phoenix. Grandfather is in custody. The base is secure. Wade's voice came through clear and strong, though the sound of gunfire could still be heard in the background. Copy that, son. I'm proud of you. Are you ready for the next phase? What next phase, Dad? Check the files I uploaded. Your mother and Eric aren't just guilty of adultery. They've been using their relationship to pass intelligence to private military contractors. Harvey wasn't just covering up an affair, he was protecting a spy ring. Preston's blood turned to ice as he accessed the encrypted files his father had transmitted. Photos, bank records, communication logs, all painting a picture of systematic betrayal that went far beyond a simple extramarital affair. Sir, Fritz called out urgently. We're getting distress calls from multiple locations. It looks like synchronized attacks on 3 different outposts. The timing, it's like someone knew our defensive positions would be compromised today. Preston's mind raced as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. The convoy ambush wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was the opening move in a larger operation designed to cripple military operations in the sector. Dad, Preston called into the radio, we've got multiple attacks. This was coordinated. Wade's response was chilling in its calm certainty. I know, son. I've been tracking this for months. Your mother's been feeding our operational schedules to Eric, and Eric's been selling them to the highest bidder. Today was supposed to be the day I died, and their network stayed hidden. What do? We finish this. Every single one of them. Harvey struggled against his restraints, his voice desperate. Preston, think about what you're doing. That's your mother he's talking about. Preston turned to face his grandfather with eyes that held none of the warmth Harvey remembered from the boy he'd helped raise. My mother betrayed my father, her country, and got good soldiers killed for money. She stopped being my mother the moment she chose treason over family. The transformation was complete. The boy Harvey had hoped to manipulate was gone, replaced by a young man with his father's ruthless clarity and his father's absolute code. Betrayal was unforgivable, no matter who committed it. Outside, the sound of helicopters grew louder as Wade's allies arrived to secure the base. Inside, Preston methodically began dismantling the spy network that had cost American lives and nearly cost his father everything. The Burns family civil war had begun, and Preston had chosen his side. Chapter 4, Gathering Storm. The interrogation rooms at FOB Meridian had seen many broken men, But Harvey Cook's particular brand of desperation was something new. Wade sat across from his former father-in-law, his own wounds bandaged, but his focus laser-sharp. The convoy ambush had been neutralized, but the cost had been high. 3 of his men wounded, and a conspiracy that reached higher than anyone had imagined. 23 years, Harvey whispered, staring at his shackled hands. 23 years I've served this country, and you destroy it all in one day. Wade's voice was winter cold. You destroyed it the moment you chose to protect traitors over soldiers. Kendra's been feeding intelligence to private contractors for 18 months. How many operations were compromised? How many soldiers died because you couldn't control your daughter? She didn't know what she was doing. Eric convinced her it was routine intelligence sharing. Stop. Wade's word cut through Harvey's excuses like a blade. I've read the bank records. $200,000 in offshore accounts. Kendra knew exactly what she was selling. Through the one-way glass, Preston watched his father methodically dismantle any hope of mercy. In the past 6 hours, Preston had learned things about his mother that shattered every memory of childhood bedtime stories and family dinners. Sergeant Major Fox entered the observation room, carrying a tablet loaded with fresh intelligence. We've traced the money trail. Eric Leonard's been the middleman for a network called Crimson Consulting, mercenaries who sell American operational intelligence to anyone willing to pay. How long? Preston asked. Best estimate? 3 years. Your mother's affair with Leonard wasn't random. He targeted her specifically because of her access to your father's mission schedules and your grandfather's operational planning. Preston felt something break inside his chest. His mother hadn't just betrayed his father for love or lust. She'd been systematically recruited and exploited by enemy operatives. And she'd taken the money willingly. In the interrogation room, Wade leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, Harvey. You're going to give me every detail about Leonard's network. Names, contacts, methods, everything. In exchange, I'll make sure your court-martial is handled quietly. And if I refuse? Wade's smile was the expression of a predator. Then I release everything to the media. Your daughter's treason, your complicity, the dead soldiers, all of it. Preston's military career survives because he chose the right side. Yours ends in public disgrace. Harvey's resistance crumbled. Eric has a handler, a woman named Marissa Cole. She operates out of Dubai, coordinates with terrorist cells and private military companies. Kendra thought she was just providing harmless strategic assessments, but Marissa was using that intelligence to plan attacks on American positions. Wade's expression didn't change, but Preston saw his father's hands clench into fists. Where is Leonard now? Safe house in the capital. Grid coordinates. Harvey rattled off numbers that Preston immediately began tracing on his tactical display. Dad, Preston's voice came through the intercom. Leonard's location is confirmed. But sir, there's something else. I'm reading intercepted communications. Leonard and Mom are planning to extract tonight. Private jet, destination Dubai. Wade stood slowly, his movements deliberate and final. Harvey, you just bought yourself a quick court-martial instead of a public execution. Consider it the last favor I'll ever do for family. Wade, please, Kendra is still your wife. Still Preston's mother. Wade paused at the door, his back to Harvey. No, Kendra Burns died the day she chose money over soldiers' lives. What's left is just a traitor who shares my name. Outside the interrogation room, Wade found Preston studying satellite feeds of the capital. How long until they extract? 6 hours, maybe 8. But Dad, what are we going to do about Mom? Wade's answer came without hesitation. What we do to all traitors, son. We stop them. Preston looked up at his father, seeing something in those gray eyes that made him understand why enemy combatants had learned to fear Wade Burns. Dad, she's still nothing to us. Wade cut him off. The woman who raised you died when she started selling American lives for profit. What's left is a security threat that needs to be neutralized. You mean captured? Wade's silence stretched long enough for Preston to understand that capture wasn't what his father had in mind. Dad, you can't. She's a traitor, but she's still responsible for Sergeant Williams, Corporal Johnson, and Private First Class Murphy. Wade's voice carried the weight of ghosts. 3 good soldiers died in operations that were compromised by intelligence she sold. She doesn't get to run away to Dubai and live comfortably on blood money. Preston felt the final walls of his childhood crumble. His father wasn't just talking about arresting his mother. He was talking about something much more permanent. I need to know, son, are you with me? Or are you going to let sentiment compromise your judgment? Preston looked at the satellite feed showing his mother and her lover preparing to flee the country with stolen intelligence and blood money. The choice between family sentiment and military duty crystallized in his mind with painful clarity. What do you need me to do, Dad? Wade's smile was proud and terrible. Help me plan a funeral. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The safe house in the capital was a converted warehouse in the diplomatic district, chosen for its proximity to embassies and its multiple escape routes. Eric Leonard had planned well, but he'd planned against conventional military response, not against Wade Burns operating outside official channels. Wade crouched on the rooftop across from the warehouse, his sniper rifle trained on the building's entrance. Through his scope, he could see movement behind the second-floor windows, two figures packing documents and equipment. His wife of 20 years and the man who'd systematically destroyed their family. Preston's voice crackled through his earpiece. Thermal shows 4 heat signatures. Leonard, Mom, and 2 security contractors. Private military based on their movement patterns. Equipment. Standard small arms. But they've got a communications array that's been broadcasting encrypted signals every 30 minutes. They're definitely coordinating with outside handlers. Wade adjusted his position, finding the perfect angle for what came next. Rules of engagement, son? Preston's response came after a long pause. She made her choice, Dad. Multiple times, over multiple years. She chose money over soldiers' lives. Through the scope, Wade watched Kendra move past a window, and for a moment, muscle memory threatened to derail his focus. This was the woman who'd sewn his lieutenant's bars on his uniform, who'd been waiting at the airport when he'd returned from his first deployment, who'd cried with joy when Preston took his first steps. But that woman had died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone who could sell intelligence that got American soldiers killed. Movement, Preston reported. Black sedan approaching from the north. Diplomatic plates. Wade tracked the vehicle through his scope. Their extraction. Time to move. The operation unfolded with surgical precision. Preston disabled the warehouse's power grid, while Wade neutralized the external security with suppressed shots that dropped both contractors before they could raise an alarm. 20 years of special forces training distilled into 90 seconds of perfect violence. Wade breached the warehouse through the skylight, dropping into the second floor like a ghost. Leonard was waiting, his sidearm drawn, using Kendra as a human shield. Burns, I know you're here. Let's talk about this like civilized men. Wade's voice came from the shadows, disembodied and menacing. Civilized men don't sell intelligence to terrorists. Civilized men don't get soldiers killed for profit. It was never supposed to go this far. Leonard's voice cracked with desperation. The intelligence was supposed to be harmless. Troop rotations, supply schedules. Marissa promised no one would get hurt. But people did get hurt, Wade replied, his position still concealed. 3 good men died because of information you and my wife provided. Did you split the blood money, or did she get a bonus for being a better actress? Kendra spoke for the first time, her voice shaking. Wade, please. I never meant for anyone to die. Eric said it was just routine information sharing. Shut up. Wade's command cut through her plea like a blade. Preston played me the recordings, Kendra. Your handler specifically asked for patrol routes through IED-prone areas. You knew soldiers would die, and you took the money anyway. Leonard pressed his gun harder against Kendra's temple. Nobody has to die here today, Burns. We walk away, disappear, and everyone wins. Wade finally stepped into the light, his own weapon trained on Leonard with mechanical precision. Everyone doesn't win, Eric. 3 soldiers are dead because of you. Their families will never win. The men who trusted you and got betrayed will never win. So what? You're going to execute us? That makes you a murderer. Wade's expression didn't change. No, that makes me a soldier cleaning up a security threat. The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Leonard's hand shook slightly, sweat beading on his forehead. Kendra's eyes met Wade's across the room, and in them, he saw not remorse but calculation. She was still looking for an angle, still planning her next move. Wade, she said softly, remember our wedding day? Remember the promises we made? I remember, Wade replied. I promised to honor and protect you. You promised to love and cherish me. Guess we both broke our promises. It doesn't have to end like this. Wade's finger found his trigger. Yes, it does. The shot came not from Wade's rifle, but from behind Leonard. Preston had entered through the rear stairwell, his sidearm trained on the man who'd destroyed his family. Leonard spun, reflexively bringing his gun around, and Wade didn't hesitate. 2 shots. Leonard dropped instantly, his weapon clattering across the floor. Kendra screamed and fell to her knees beside him, her hands frantically trying to stem the bleeding from wounds that were already fatal. Why? She sobbed, looking up at Wade. Why did it have to end like this? Wade lowered his weapon, his voice carrying 20 years of betrayal and disappointment. Because you chose money over family. Because you chose terrorists over soldiers. Because you chose to become something I can't forgive. Preston approached cautiously, his weapon still drawn. Mom, we found the accounts. $700,000 over 3 years. How many soldiers' lives were worth that much to you? Kendra's face cycled through denial, anger, and finally desperate manipulation. Preston, sweetheart, you don't understand. They threatened to hurt you, hurt the family. I had to cooperate. Stop lying. Preston cut her off coldly. The money trail shows voluntary participation. You weren't a victim, Mom. You were a willing participant in treason. Wade watched his wife, his former wife, realized that both her husband and son had moved beyond forgiveness. The woman he'd loved was truly dead, and what remained was just a criminal in the body he'd once known intimately. Preston, Wade said quietly, call it in. Tell them we eliminated 2 enemy assets and recovered classified intelligence. Dad, what about Mom? Wade looked down at Kendra, who was still kneeling beside Leonard's body, blood on her hands and desperation in her eyes. What about her? I don't see anyone here but enemy combatants. The truth of what Wade intended settled over Kendra like a death shroud. She looked up at her husband and son, the family she'd betrayed for money, and saw only the cold eyes of soldiers who'd classified her as a threat to be eliminated. Wade, please. My name is Sergeant Major Burns, Wade replied. And you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. The last word echoed through the warehouse like a prayer, but Wade Burns had stopped believing in mercy the day his family chose money over loyalty. Chapter 6, Fallout. The military tribunal convened in a windowless room at Joint Base Andrews, far from the media attention that would have devoured a story about a colonel's daughter selling intelligence to enemy operatives. Wade sat in the witness chair, his dress uniform pressed to perfection, medals glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. Sergeant Major Burns, the presiding judge asked, in your opinion, was Mrs. Kendra Burns acting under duress when she provided classified intelligence to Major Leonard's handler? Wade's answer came without hesitation. No, sir. Analysis of her banking records shows systematic deposits over a 36-month period, totaling $743,000. The regularity and voluntary nature of these transactions indicate willing participation in espionage activities. In the gallery, Harvey Cook sat shackled between 2 MPs, his career destroyed, but his life spared in exchange for his cooperation. He watched his son-in-law methodically destroy any hope Kendra might have had for clemency. Kendra's defense attorney, a young JAG officer named Captain Stella Joseph, tried desperately to humanize her client. Sergeant Major, regardless of the financial evidence, isn't it possible that Mrs. Burns was psychologically manipulated by Major Leonard? That she believed she was helping with legitimate intelligence sharing? Wade's gray eyes fixed on the attorney with the intensity of a targeting laser. Captain, I've reviewed the communication logs between my wife and her handler. In one particular exchange, Kendra specifically requested additional payment for providing patrol routes through high-risk areas. She knew American soldiers would be traveling those routes. She knew they would likely encounter hostile action. She took extra money to ensure they would. The courtroom fell silent except for the soft sound of Kendra weeping. Preston sat in the front row, his dress uniform immaculate, his face carved from stone. He hadn't spoken to his mother since the warehouse, hadn't visited her in confinement, hadn't acknowledged her existence in any way. The prosecution calls Lieutenant Preston Burns to the stand. Preston rose with military precision, his movements sharp and controlled. As he passed his mother's table, Kendra reached out to touch his arm. He pulled away as if she carried a contagious disease. Under oath, Preston's testimony was devastating. Your Honor, I personally monitored communications between my mother and Major Leonard's network. She provided intelligence that directly resulted in the deaths of Sergeant Williams, Corporal Johnson, and Private Murphy during operations in the Khalid province. She was paid $50,000 for the specific intelligence that led to their ambush. Kendra's attorney tried to object, but Preston continued relentlessly. Furthermore, analysis of her communications shows she specifically requested hazard pay for intelligence that would put American forces at risk. This wasn't a woman being manipulated. This was a professional spy selling soldiers' lives for profit. Son, Captain Joseph pleaded, surely you can't believe your own mother intended for soldiers to die. Preston's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. My mother died the day she chose money over loyalty. The woman sitting at that table is just a traitor who happens to share my DNA. Kendra broke down completely, her sobs echoing off the courtroom walls. But neither Wade nor Preston showed any reaction. They'd already grieved for the woman they'd loved, and what remained was just an enemy to be neutralized through legal means. During the lunch recess, Wade found himself alone with Harvey in a secure conference room. His former father-in-law looked aged beyond his years, the weight of his daughter's treason and his own complicity etched into every line of his face. She was a good girl once, Harvey said quietly. Before Eric, before the money. She used to bake cookies for your deployments, worried sick every time you left. Wade poured himself coffee with steady hands. That person is gone, Harvey. Has been for years. What we're dealing with now is a security threat that needs to be contained. She's still your wife. Still Preston's mother. No, Wade replied with finality. She's a convicted traitor who will spend the rest of her life in federal prison. The marriage ended the day she chose money over soldiers' lives. And Preston? What happens to him after this? Wade's expression softened slightly when he thought about his son. Preston made his choice. He chose duty over blood, honor over sentiment. He'll have a good career in the military, assuming he can live with what we've done here. Can you live with it? Wade turned to face Harvey directly. I've killed enemy combatants in 12 different countries, Harvey. I've eliminated threats to American forces without losing a single night's sleep. Kendra became a threat the moment she took money to get soldiers killed. The fact that I once loved her doesn't change what she became. Harvey stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers to questions he didn't want to ask. What about forgiveness? What about redemption? Those are luxuries that soldiers' families can't afford, Wade replied. Williams left behind a wife and twin daughters. Johnson's mother just buried her only child. Murphy was 19 years old. Harvey, 19. Where's their forgiveness? Where's their redemption? The afternoon session delivered the verdict that everyone expected, guilty on all counts. Kendra Burns was sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole, her assets seized to provide compensation to the families of the soldiers killed by her intelligence. As the MPs led her away, Kendra looked back one final time at Wade and Preston. Her husband's face showed nothing, no anger, no sadness, no regret. Just the cold satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. Preston met her eyes for a moment, and she saw in them the same ruthless certainty that had made Wade Burns legendary among Special Forces operators. Her son had inherited more than his father's gray eyes and tactical mind. He'd inherited his absolute code of loyalty and his complete inability to forgive betrayal. Preston, she called out desperately as the guards pulled her toward the door. Preston, please. He turned away without a word, and Kendra Burns disappeared into the federal prison system with the knowledge that she'd lost not just her freedom, but her family's love forever. Wade and Preston walked out of the courthouse together, two soldiers who'd chosen duty over blood and never looked back. Chapter 7. New Allegiances. 6 months after the tribunal, Wade Burns stood in his new office at the Pentagon, reading intelligence reports that would have been impossible to access as a field operative. His promotion to lieutenant colonel had come with the military's gratitude for exposing a major security breach, but Wade knew the real reason for his advancement. The Department of Defense needed operators who could make impossible choices without sentiment clouding their judgment. Preston knocked on the door frame, his captain's bars still shiny from his recent promotion. Dad, you wanted to see me? Wade gestured to a chair across from his desk. We have a problem. Marissa Cole, Leonard's handler in Dubai, has surfaced. She's threatening to release classified intelligence unless the military pays her $50 million. Intelligence she got from Mom and Leonard? Worse, she claims to have operational details about ongoing missions, troop movements in classified theaters. If she releases this information, hundreds of American soldiers could die. Preston studied the intelligence brief with the same cold efficiency his father had taught him. What's our authorization level for response? Wade's smile was sharp as a blade. Unlimited. The Secretary of Defense has given us carte blanche to resolve this threat through any means necessary. Us. I'm forming a special operations unit. Off books, maximum deniability. Personnel selected based on loyalty and operational effectiveness rather than traditional command structure. Wade leaned forward. I want you as my second in command. Preston looked up from the files, understanding immediately what his father was proposing. Dad, this sounds like an assassination unit. This is a counterintelligence cleanup crew, Wade corrected. We identify threats to American forces and eliminate them before they can act. What Kendra and Leonard did, selling intelligence that got soldiers killed, that can never happen again. Not on our watch. What about legal oversight? Congressional authorization? Wade's expression grew cold. Preston, do you remember Sergeant Williams' funeral? His 8-year-old daughter asking why Daddy wasn't coming home? Legal oversight didn't protect him. Congressional authorization didn't save his life. Preston set down the files, his mind racing through the implications. You're talking about operating outside the law. I'm talking about protecting American soldiers from threats that the law can't touch fast enough. Wade pulled out another folder. Marissa Cole isn't just threatening to release intelligence. She's actively coordinating with terrorist cells to plan attacks on American bases. While lawyers debate jurisdiction and politicians worry about international law, she's planning to kill more soldiers. What about extradition? Working through diplomatic channels. Dubai won't extradite her. She has connections to their intelligence services, probably paying them a percentage of her profits. Diplomatic channels will take months, maybe years. How many soldiers die while we follow proper procedures? Preston stared at his father, seeing the same ruthless logic that had condemned his mother and grandfather. Wade Burns had moved beyond traditional military constraints, operating in a gray area where results mattered more than methods. Who else is in this unit? Wade activated a secure computer terminal, displaying personnel files. Sergeant Major Clayton Fox, Sergeant Ted Brewer, Master Sergeant Martin Houston. Men who've served with me. Men who understand that some threats require permanent solutions. Men who were at the convoy ambush. Men who watched their brothers die because of intelligence sold by my wife, Wade corrected grimly. Men who understand that stopping threats like Marissa Cole isn't just professional, it's personal. Preston read through the operational parameters, noting the complete absence of legal restrictions or oversight mechanisms. Dad, this is basically a death squad with military funding. This is a scalpel for removing cancer before it spreads, Wade replied. Marissa Cole has intelligence that could compromise every special forces operation in 3 theaters. She's demanding $50 million, and if she doesn't get it, she'll sell that intelligence to whoever pays the most. And our response? Wade's answer came without hesitation. We eliminate her and recover all copies of the intelligence. Complete sterilization of the threat. Preston closed the file, his decision crystallizing. What's our timeline? 72 hours. Cole is meeting with potential buyers in 3 days. If we don't stop her, operational security for half our overseas forces gets compromised. Rules of engagement? Wade's smile was cold and final. There are no rules, son. There are only results. Preston stood, straightening his uniform. I'll need complete operational authority in the field. You'll have it. And if we're discovered? If this gets exposed? Wade leaned back in his chair, his expression showing no doubt or regret. Then we become the kind of men who do what's necessary to protect American soldiers, regardless of the personal cost. Just like we did with your mother. Preston nodded slowly, understanding that his father was offering him a choice similar to the one he'd faced in that warehouse. Choose family sentiment over duty, or choose to become something harder and more necessary. When do we deploy? Tomorrow night. Preston. Wade's voice stopped his son at the door. Once we cross this line, there's no going back. We become operators who exist outside normal military structure. Men who make the choices that others can't. Preston turned back to face his father. Like Mother always said, we don't forgive and we don't forget. Especially when forgiveness gets soldiers killed, Wade agreed. As Preston left to prepare for their first mission, Wade opened another file on his desk, a list of intelligence operatives, weapons dealers, and terrorist financiers who had American soldiers' blood on their hands. Marissa Cole was just the beginning. The Burns family had always believed in loyalty and justice. Now they were going to enforce those beliefs with military precision and unlimited authority. Chapter 8. Dubai Reckoning. The skyline of Dubai glittered like scattered diamonds against the desert night as Wade's team prepared for what would either be a surgical strike or the beginning of an international incident. From their position on the roof of the Burj Khalifa's observation deck, they had perfect sight lines to the luxury hotel where Marissa Cole was conducting her auction of American intelligence. Heat signatures confirmed 12 individuals in the penthouse suite, Martin Houston reported through his headset. Cole, 3 bodyguards, and 8 potential buyers from various hostile intelligence services. Wade adjusted his night vision scope, studying the building's layout one final time. Preston, status on building security? Neutralized. For guards eliminated, surveillance system looped. We have a 20-minute window before the next security rotation. Preston's voice carried the cold efficiency Wade had trained into him. Ted Brewer's voice crackled through the calm movement in the lobby. Dubai Police, 2 units. Someone might have spotted our entry. Wade's decision came instantly. Clayton, deal with it. Non-lethal if possible, permanent if necessary. We cannot afford exposure. Copy that. Wade had assembled his team from men who'd lost brothers to the intelligence Kendra and Leonard had sold. Each of them understood that Marissa Cole represented more than just a security threat. She was the continuation of a betrayal that had started in their own ranks. Fox, you're on Overwatch. Anyone tries to leave that building, you put them down. Understood, sir. Wade and Preston moved through the hotel's service corridors with practiced stealth, their movements coordinated from years of training together. The building's luxury fixtures and marble floors seemed obscene when Wade considered that the money funding this operation had come from selling American soldiers' lives. Dad. Preston's voice was barely a whisper through the calm. Thermal shows Cole is wearing a suicide vest. If she triggers it, she takes out everyone in that room, including the intelligence we need to recover. Wade paused at the stairwell door, processing this complication. Can you get a clear shot on the detonator? Negative. Too much interference from the bodyguards, and the explosive vest appears to be dead man's switch activated. If her heart stops, it triggers automatically. Wade smiled grimly. Then we make sure her heart doesn't stop until we have what we need. The assault began with precision that would have impressed their former Special Forces instructors. Wade breached through the suite's main entrance while Preston came through the balcony, their timing perfect to catch Cole's auction in full swing. Nobody moved. Wade's voice cut through the room like a blade. Hands visible, weapons down. Marissa Cole stood at the head of a conference table, a tablet in her hands displaying classified American troop movements. She was younger than Wade had expected, perhaps 35, with the cold beauty of someone who'd learned to weaponize every advantage she possessed. Sergeant Major Burns, she said calmly, as if she'd been expecting him. I wondered when you'd find me. It's Lieutenant Colonel now. Your intelligence network got me promoted. Cole's laugh was like broken glass. My network? Darling, your wife was just one source among dozens. Did you really think Leonard was her only handler? Wade felt something cold settle in his stomach. Explain. Kendra wasn't just selling intelligence to Leonard. She was part of a larger network that I've been running for 7 years. Military wives, base personnel, contractors, anyone with access to operational intelligence and flexible morality. Preston moved closer, his weapon trained on Cole's bodyguards. How many? 47 active sources across 12 bases. Your wife was my most productive asset, but hardly my only one. Cole's smile was triumphant. Kill me, and you'll never find them all. Let me walk away, and I'll give you the complete network roster. Wade considered the offer with tactical detachment. What's to stop you from rebuilding the network once you're free? Nothing. But at least you'll know who's been selling your soldiers' lives. Dad. Preston's voice was tight with control. We can't let her walk. She's responsible for dozens of operational compromises. Wade nodded slowly. You're right, son. We can't. The shot came from Wade's sidearm, precise and final. Cole's head snapped back, her body crumpling to the floor before her dead man's switch could register the change in her heart rate. The room erupted in chaos as Cole's bodyguards and the intelligence buyers opened fire. Wade and Preston moved like a synchronized unit, their training and shared rage creating a deadly efficiency that cleared the room in under 2 minutes. Houston, start downloading everything from Cole's systems. I want every file, every contact, every transaction record. Already on it, sir. Jesus Christ. Dad, this network is massive. She wasn't lying about 47 sources. Preston knelt beside Cole's body, searching through her clothing until he found what he was looking for, an encrypted smartphone that had survived the firefight. Got her personal communications device. If there's a complete network roster, it'll be on here. Wade surveyed the carnage with professional satisfaction. Any survivors? Negative. Complete sterilization. Good. Preston, set the charges. We burn this entire operation. As they prepared to destroy the evidence of their presence, Preston paused beside his father. Dad, when we identify the other network members, what's our authorization level? Wade's answer came without hesitation. Unlimited. Every single one of them is a threat to American forces. Every single one of them has soldiers' blood on their hands. Including military wives? Including contractors with families. Wade's expression showed no mercy. Including anyone who chose money over loyalty. Kendra made that choice. Apparently, she wasn't unique. Preston nodded, understanding that their mission had just expanded from eliminating one threat to dismantling an entire network of betrayal. How do we handle the scale? Carefully, quietly, one target at a time until the network is completely eliminated. As the explosions destroyed the penthouse suite and erased all evidence of Marissa Cole's auction, Wade and Preston Burns descended through the burning building with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished and the grim anticipation of much more work ahead. The intelligence they'd recovered would lead them to dozens more targets, men and women who'd sold American soldiers' lives for profit. Wade's new unit had found its purpose, hunting down every single person who'd contributed to that betrayal. No mercy, no forgiveness, no exceptions. The way the Burns family had always operated. Chapter 9, Blood Legacy. 1 year later, Wade Burns stood in Arlington National Cemetery, placing fresh flowers on 3 graves that had become his personal shrines. Sergeant Williams, Corporal Johnson, and Private Murphy, the soldiers who died because of intelligence his wife had sold. Preston approached from behind, his footsteps respectfully quiet on the manicured grass. Dad, final numbers are in. Wade didn't turn around, his attention focused on the marble headstones. How many? 47 network members eliminated over 11 months. Complete sterilization of Marissa Cole's intelligence network. No survivors, no evidence, no loose ends. Collateral damage? Minimal. 3 family members who tried to protect active network assets. They made their choice. Wade finally turned to face his son, noting the harder lines around Preston's eyes, the way his movements had acquired the controlled precision of a man who'd killed for his country. Any regrets? Preston considered the question with the same tactical analysis Wade had taught him. About protecting American soldiers from people who'd sell their lives for money? None whatsoever. They walked together through the cemetery, past row after row of white headstones marking soldiers who'd died in service to their country. Wade had memorized the names on dozens of those markers, men and women who'd died because operational security had been compromised by people like his wife. The Secretary of Defense wants to meet with us next week, Preston reported. Apparently, our success rate has attracted attention from other agencies. CIA, among others. There's talk of expanding our mandate beyond counterintelligence cleanup. Wade smiled grimly. They want us to become a permanent solution for threats that regular military can't handle legally. Is that what we are now, Dad? Professional killers with government sanction. Wade paused beside a memorial bench, his expression thoughtful. We're soldiers who've learned that some threats require permanent solutions. We're men who understand that protecting American forces sometimes means operating outside traditional constraints. And we're okay with that. Wade's answer came without hesitation. Preston, in the past year, we've prevented the deaths of hundreds of American soldiers by eliminating the people who would have sold intelligence to get them killed. Every person we've eliminated was a direct threat to military personnel. Every single one had chosen profit over loyalty. Preston nodded slowly. Like Mom. Exactly like your mother. They sat on the bench, two men who'd chosen duty over blood and never looked back. Around them, families visited graves, children played on distant hills, and life continued with the normalcy that Wade and Preston's actions had helped preserve. There's something else, Preston said quietly. I've been monitoring communications from the federal prison where Mom is being held. Wade's expression didn't change. And she's been trying to establish communication with other inmates, looking for connections to intelligence networks. Even in prison, she's still trying to sell information. Wade absorbed this news with the cold calculation that had become his default response to betrayal. What kind of information? Details about our unit. Our methods. Names of targets we've eliminated. Preston's voice carried disgust. She's trying to sell intelligence about our operations to whoever will pay for it. Wade stood, his decision already made. How long until her next communication attempt? 3 days. She's arranged a meeting with a convicted arms dealer who has connections to terrorist financiers. Arrange a visit. Official family meeting. Preston understood immediately what his father intended. Dad, she's in federal custody. Security cameras, guards, official records. She's a continuing security threat who's attempting to compromise ongoing military operations. Wade cut him off. That makes her a legitimate target for elimination under our current mandate. You want to kill Mom in federal prison. Wade's voice carried no emotion. I want to eliminate a security threat before she can compromise more soldiers' lives. The fact that the threat happens to be genetically related to us is irrelevant. Preston stared at his father, seeing the absolute certainty that had made Wade Burns legendary among Special Forces operators. There was no sentiment left, no family attachment that could override tactical necessity. What about me? Preston asked quietly. What happens to me after we cross that line? Wade placed a hand on his son's shoulder, the gesture carrying both affection and ruthless expectation. You become the kind of man who can live with doing what's necessary to protect American soldiers. You become someone who understands that loyalty to the mission transcends every other consideration, even family, especially family, because family that betrays the mission becomes the enemy. Preston looked out across the cemetery, seeing not just graves, but a representation of the soldiers he'd sworn to protect. Men and women who died serving their country, who deserved better than having their lives sold for profit by people who shared their uniform or their blood. When do we visit her? Wade's smile was cold and final. Tomorrow. One last family reunion. As they walked away from the cemetery, neither father nor son looked back. Behind them, the graves of Williams, Johnson, and Murphy stood as silent witnesses to the transformation of two soldiers who'd learned that some betrayals were unforgivable, regardless of who committed them. The Burns family legacy had become absolute loyalty to duty and complete ruthlessness toward betrayal. It was a legacy written in blood, maintained through violence, and inherited by sons who understood that protecting American soldiers meant becoming something harder than family sentiment could survive. Wade had taught Preston that forgiveness was a luxury that got soldiers killed. Tomorrow, they would prove that lesson one final time. The woman who had once been wife and mother would die as she had lived for the past 4 years, as a threat to American forces that needed to be eliminated. No mercy, no forgiveness, no exceptions. The way it had always been in the Burns family. The way it would always be. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.